Karl, in this spooky of seasons, I'm slowly being just, clearly drawn into the empty void.
All you need is a couple of spiderwebs behind him to say it's the aesthetic.
There's probably a couple in the background, up in the corners. I haven't cleaned the house yet, because obviously we haven't moved all the stuff out yet, so, there's probably some hidden cobwebs about.
What's freaking me out is you got the same, cupboard thing as I've got.
Oh, really?
Did you get it on Amazon for 60 quid and went, that'll do?
Yeah.
That's what I did.
It was one step up from the cheap, knockoff, not IKEA ones that I had behind me on this side.
Yeah, it's alright.
Hopefully I'll upgrade from, those ones or this one to, this one and nicer ones.
No, I've not upgraded to that yet, mate. You know what? Don't rise above your station in life.
I know, right? Speaking of going above and beyond, Karl, I guess this is a video brought to people going above and beyond because they supported us over on our Patreon and voted for the subject of today's video.
Which is?
Today's subject was, I was going to talk about a spooky game from a, gaming generation that I'm familiar with. Things like the N64, PS1 era of game consoles, or PS2, GameCube, Xbox, PS3, 360, Wii, PS4, Xbone, and the Switch.
That's in there deep, right, X-Bone.
The lovely patrons voted for a game from the Xbox 360 generation, and the game that I have chosen, I didn't realise at the time was actually exclusive to the 360.
Okay, so this is a horror game exclusive to 360, Vampire Masquerade?
In the last couple of years, it's had a second game come out.
Prey?
No, it's a game where you fight off monsters with the power of a flashlight, Karl.
Oh, Alan Wake.
We're talking about Alan Wake.
Alan Wake was an Xbox 360 exclusive?
Yeah, I know. I didn't remember that at the time. And it's surprising going back to the 360 where you're like, oh man, yeah, the reason why it did so well in that generation, other than, PlayStation being give us $600 for a console.
Mm-hmm.
Just they had a lot of exclusives at the time, if not
what games?
Outright exclusives. They had a lot of timed exclusives. Remember Mass Effect started as exclusive to the 360.
Yeah, Mass Effect 2, when you played that on the PlayStation 3, you couldn't carry over your save from the first game because the first game wasn't on the PS3. Yeah,
they had to just do that little interactive magazine style thing.
Yep.
And obviously you could use that on the 360 version if you hadn't played Mass Effect, but yeah, it was the only way you had to kind of bring choices in from Mass Effect if you played on the PS3.
And I forgot Alan Wake was just an Xbox 360 exclusive. What a weird time.
It is a spooky game, but according to Wikipedia, it's not a horror game.
What kind of game is it then?
So, Alan Wake is a 2010 action-adventure game developed by Remedy Entertainment and published by Microsoft Game Studios.
That's it, you do a lot of things in that game. I wouldn't say many of them are action-packed.
Not until you play, not a DLC, it was the American Nightmare, little downloadable game where they decided, you know what everyone loved about Alan Wake?
Combat.
Just the action alone.
Yeah. It's no one enjoyed the game for that reason. They enjoyed it for its atmosphere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And as I say, it's not necessarily a horror game, but it is a spooky game.
Yeah. And the fact that they describe it as an action game, that feels like that's so emblematic of the Xbox 360 era of if you didn't give your main character a gun, no one wanted to play the fucking game.
If I was to say, is this closer to horror or action-adventure, I would have chosen horror.
Yeah.
Personally. It's not a very scary game, but it's very atmospheric, it's very dark, it's very creepy, it's got a lot of, very kind of spooky themes. Whereas action-adventure is so generic a genre, right? Anything can be action-adventure.
This reminds me a little of Silent Hill Homecoming, which was also on the Xbox 360, where they tried to make Silent Hill more action-based, and your main character is a former soldier, and you could do, knife combos. Problem with that game is the combat was really bad, but also really strong. So no enemy in the game was a threat as long as you had your basic knife, because the 4-hit combo was so fast and so effective you could stun lock every enemy in the game to death, including bosses.
That does sound stupid, right? The idea of, well, we've taken this horror game and we're going to amp it up to be more actiony, but bear in mind, when Resident Evil did that, it didn't just make Resident Evil 4, it also made Devil May Cry.
Yeah.
So them making Resident Evil into an action game gave us two of the greatest games of the time.
It did indeed, yes. And that's like Devil May Cry, if people don't know the backstory to that is, it initially started life as Resident Evil 4, but it became so wild in its scope and the amount of crazy bullshit that you could do that they decided, let's just spin it off and make it into a new game. Because, okay, Leon Kennedy can do some crazy fucking bullshit. He can't fly. He can't kick someone into the air and keep them aloft with dual pistol combos. He can't do a rainstorm.
I think Leon Kennedy might be able to do a rainstorm.
Modern Leon Kennedy could.
That's the thing, at the time we were going from like Resident Evil, 2 and 3, where it was fucking tank control systems and stuff. Like, they just decided, this action game, which eventually became Devil May Cry, this is too far gone from being a Resident Evil game.
Yeah, so make it into its own franchise, and they really desperately tried to do it with Silent Hill. Like I said, and the main character looks exactly like every Xbox 360 protagonist of the era. Like the short brown hair and the stubble and the knife.
Yeah, that's the thing. At least Alan Wake stands out in that sense. Yeah, he is just a sad white guy going on his travels and running around with a gun, but he's got a flashlight, he's got floppy hair, he's got a writer's jacket, Karl.
Yeah, he's a goober.
It's fitting that Alan Wake 2 came out and turned into basically a horror game, right?
The horror game it was always meant to be, yeah.
Yeah, Alan Wake is such a horror franchise protagonist.
Also, as well, how bored did you get of people pointing out when the game came out of do you get it? Alan Wake. Wake. It's like, yeah, we get it. I saw the front of the box as well, mate.
It's like all of the different names for like the people who end up becoming like the Riddler in different Batman things.
Yeah.
Did you know that Edward Nigma, or it's Enigma, or Mr. Reese? And it's like,
Mr. Reese?
Yes.
Yep.
Got it.
They act though as if like they're the only person who ever noticed that. And it's like, this is a series designed for kids. Yeah, not Alan Wake, but like Batman.
Alan Wake. Yeah, the series designed for kids. But what maybe the reason why we're forgetting it was specifically 360 game is because there was a remastered version that released, and it was admittedly October 2021, but it did release for PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Series X and S, and Windows. And then a Switch version came out in October 2022, so just kind of the way that it released the remaster probably wiped from our memory that it was a 360 exclusive.
Oh, tell me about Alan Wake though, because one of the only things I remember about the first Alan Wake game is the fact that they had to release an update that took out a bunch of licensed stuff.
Oh, we'll get to that, Karl.
Okay, is that in the Wiki? Okay, let's go, because I'm so excited to talk about that.
So the story of Alan Wake follows the best-selling crime thriller novelist Alan Wake as he tries to uncover the mystery behind his wife's disappearance during a vacation in the small fictional town of Bright Falls, Washington, all while experiencing events from the plot of his latest novel, which he cannot remember writing, coming to life. This entire game is like the unreliable narrator kind of game where
literally
what is real, what is not. Similar to like Silent Hill 2 of like, does Silent Hill fucking exist? Are you ever there?
Also, someone on production read Stephen King.
Oh yeah, that's another thing we need to get to is just the different influences, because the two that just like unabashedly, like one of his sleeves just says Stephen King and the other one says Twin Peaks, and it's just yeah. In its pacing and structure, Alan Wake is similar to a thriller television series with episodes that contain plot twists and cliffhangers. The game consists of 6 episodes, and the storyline continues in 2 extra special episodes, The Signal and The Writer, that were made available as downloadable content in the year of the game's release. It says that as if it's a good thing, but man, that really feels like, oh, we ripped out a bunch of either the middle or the end of the story and decided to sell you it as DLC.
Yeah, also, if it's based on a book, I can't remember the last time I bought a book where I got to the end and it said, wait, like, you know, pay more money for chapter 5. I'm like, wait, what? Fuck you! I bought a complete product, thank you.
That's the Kindle version.
Yeah. Imagine if the Kindle, when you got like to chapter 5, just said, give me more money for read the rest of the book.
It is written by Sam Lake and Mikko Rautalainen. Alan Wake took over 5 years to create, and the game was originally developed as an open-world survival game as an antithesis to Remedy's prior linear Max Payne games, but the team struggled over 3 years to merge the gameplay with an action thriller story.
And that's the thing, I remember Alan Wake was one of those games in development for years, and it kept changing its tone, its idea, its scope, it's like what it was about. And I love that it's written by Sam Lake. Sam Lake's like a really good writer, but all I think when I see him is, oh, that's just Max Payne.
Well, he's literally Max Payne's face.
I can't unsee Max Payne when I see him.
And I love the fact that he loves the games that he makes, and like even to this day, when people come up to him and are like, "Oh, do the Max Payne face," he leans into it.
Of course he does. The Max like that.
He loves that shit, and I love the fact that, you know, I think was it the Game Awards or something where they went on stage and did like the performance of the Alan Wake 2 musical scene or something.
Which was fantastic.
I've not played Alan Wake 2 because it went so horror game that I've heard that it would be a bit much for me. It's annoying because I really liked the concept of Alan Wake and I really wanted a sequel to that game, but then I found out, oh, it's actually quite scary and full of fucking jump scares and shit. I was like, oh, God
damn it. But that dance scene now, let's go.
And that's the kind of stuff that I want to see, or like the cool, different, like random stuff that they put in there and all the weird turns that the game takes, but I've seen some clips of like the actual scary moments in Alan Wake 2 and I don't think I could play through it. You know, everyone in the comments, I guess, let me know. No, you could definitely get through it. I couldn't play through Resident Evil 7 and that looked way scarier than RE7 did, so...
It's not something we've ever really talked about before, Lucas, but let's try and give people an idea of how good you are at dealing with big spooks. Like, what's the scariest film you could watch, you think? Or like scariest piece of media you think you could like probably sit through?
I am admittedly better with games than I am films because in games I control the situation.
Okay, and you can just turn it off, right?
Even more so, I know that I can do things to like pace it the way I want to be paced. And like, if I want to try and just sprint through a section that's meant to be scary, I can try and do that. Or if I want to take my time, I can also do it that way. Whereas a film, I'm not in control of that kind of thing.
Okay.
It's like, I know that when I'm playing Dead Space, I can hang back at the bottom of a corridor, just aim my gun down, like, and just wait for enemies to run at me.
And just pew, 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 pew.
Yeah.
So is Dead Space, you think, about as scary as you could go?
I'd say the scariest thing that I just about got through first time, ironically because I've played the game maybe about 100 times now, Resident Evil 2 Remake, when I first played that, Mr. X was just about my limit of, like, not necessarily the character, but just being able to hear him
constantly
follow me around the police station. That was getting there to my limit of scariness, I think.
Okay. So I'm not really bothered by scary stuff. Like, I watch horror movies all the time. Like, that's one of my favourite genres. Mm-hmm. Horror games, it's not that I'm scared of them. It's just that I don't like the mechanical limitations they put in place. Mm-hmm. I prefer games that are more mechanically stimulating. Because if I want to, like, watch a horror film, I'll watch a horror film.
I was quite excited for Resident Evil Village to come out because I managed RE2 and RE3, but like Resident Evil 7 I tried a couple of times and was too scary for me because the first person perspective was a bit much for me. I think it makes it, you know, more immersive and therefore easier to make it scary. Then Village was coming out and it's more akin to kind of RE4 vibes.
Yep.
I was then really excited to play it, played the demo, and I was like, but the actual gameplay isn't that fun.
You walk so fucking slow in those games.
Yeah, you really do.
It's like Silent Hill I give like props to Silent Hill because those games, it's like the story is so good that I'll forgive like the mechanical limitations because I'm getting a really good story, whereas like Resident Evil 7, the story is not good enough to justify how poorly this controls.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say that Resident Evil 7 really drops off after that first segment of the game. And similar, a lot of people say with Village, is that it drops off after the castle. Okay, well, these weird mold creatures, you didn't need like 10 hours of just running around like a swamp and a house fighting these weird mold guys when Jack Baker was the interesting part of the game.
He was the best villain and they kill him off almost instantly. He's the first thing you fight.
Same with Lady D, right?
Yep, Lady D is the most interesting villain. It would have been great. She should have been the whole game. The whole game should have been her chasing you around a mansion.
Don't waste my time.
Speaking of story, Karl.
Yes.
The plot of Alan Wake, who is voiced by Matthew Peretta, is a best-selling crime fiction author from New York City who suffers from a 2-year stretch of writer's block. And if anything in Alan Wake tells me the writing style and ability that Alan Wake has, I struggle to ever believe he was a best-selling author.
Best-selling authors always go through writer's block. Writer's block is a real thing.
I wasn't having to go with the writer's block part, it's when they show excerpts of Alan Wake's actual writing from his books and stuff. His actual writing is bad.
Yeah, that's the thing, but writer's block's totally a thing. He was based on Stephen King. Stephen King famously wrote Cujo in a weekend when he was like high on coke. If there's one thing you can say about Stephen King, is the guy, he didn't get writer's block. He wrote too much.
Like, he had the absolute opposite of whatever the fuck writer's block is. Like,
yeah, look how thick it is. Like 2,000 pages, some nonsense like that.
Speaking of, writing a book in a just blackout weekend, that's basically what Alan Wake accidentally did in this game, it seems.
Just got really high.
It's hard to remember because I played this game when it came out, but I do remember that the whole game is like complete unreliable narrator. Alan Wake keeps blacking out. Is the world real or is he hallucinating? Like, as it says later in the thing, it's like his book comes to life and starts messing with the real world, so...
I'm just imagining that episode of Futurama where Fry traps the brain in the book, and it's like, now you're trapped in my world, a world full of crappy spelling mistakes and plot holes. The big brain, I'm winning again! Now I leave for no reason! That's what Alan Wake should have done, like, if he's a shit writer, his story should be full of plot holes, like, he can just walk out and leave.
He's just, and then I found my wife again, just job's done, yeah.
And then I found my wife and her tits were so big and she was so horny for me every day.
Oh no, Karl.
Alan Wake was a real hero. That's what he'd have done.
Well, speaking of his wife, he and his wife Alice travelled to the small town of Bright Falls, Washington for a short vacation at the advice of their friend and agent, Barry Wheeler. Joey's dad, obviously. Before arriving...
Fire that fucking man.
Before arriving, Alan has a nightmare about shadowy figures who try to kill him, and when an ethereal figure in a diving suit intervenes in the dream and teaches him how to utilize the light to fend off the shadows, and that's like essentially, gameplay-wise, it's like tutorial mode. Alan gets the keys to the cabin that they're staying at, which is in the middle of Cauldron Lake, a volcanic crater lake. Just the most ominous of cabin lakes I've seen in a long time.
Wow. It's gorgeous, Alan.
It's something, all right.
If I was ever in a situation where I'm not feeling too good and said, you need to go into the middle of the woods and be alone, I'd be like, you can fuck off.
Go into a tiny little cabin town in the middle of the woods, and then from that town, go to the middle of a volcanic crater where there's a lake with one lone cabin in the middle of it. It's like, no.
Yeah, such a tropey thing, right? Of you got writer's block, so go into the middle of nowhere so you can only focus on writing.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, I guess that must be some people's process, but my process is never to completely seal myself off. It's to focus on other things, because the worst thing to do when you're struggling with writer's block or just creative, a creative impasse, you do anything else to distract yourself to free up your mind from that anxiety.
I think they're going kind of the opposite way here. Yeah, as they unpack, Alice reveals that the real purpose of their trip is to help break his writer's block by arranging for him to see a famous Bright Falls psychologist named Dr. Emil Hartman.
Is that fucking famous? Why is he like in a town of 8 people?
Yeah, he has to be away from like the hustle and bustle to give true, psychological evaluation, Karl.
Maybe he was in the woods for the same reason.
He's just stealing Alan's ideas, that's what it is. I guess tell me ideas for your next book, sir. Alan is infuriated by this reveal and storms out, only to rush back when he hears Alice crying for help. He returns just as Alice is dragged into the fucking lake by a mysterious force. Alan dives in after her, blacking out as he submerges. He has yet another hallucination of this old woman. Alan regains consciousness, apparently having driven his car off the road with no memory of how he got there. And again, this whole game is just like, what the fuck is going on? Is any of this real? Did he just fall asleep? Is this all a dream?
It's also as well, like when you're talking about being not a very good writer, if it's based on his story and already we've had, he forgot it was a dream, he has amnesia. The 3 fucking worst tropes in a piece of, in fiction.
Yeah.
If this is based on his story, he is a shit writer. Because these are the worst fucking tropes of the main character forgot.
Yeah, exactly. And oh no, he blacks out and keeps waking up with things having happened.
So we don't have to explain anything interesting because it all happened off screen.
Yeah.
Damn it. God damn it. Maybe go back to community college and learn to write better dipshit.
He doesn't need to because he's apparently a best-selling author.
To be fair, there's some shit on the bestsellers list.
He attempts to reach a nearby gas station, but progress is hampered by murderous, shadowy figures resembling those in his dream. While fighting the shadows with light, Alan repeatedly encounters an ethereal figure in a diving suit similar to the one from his dream, who leaves pages behind of a manuscript entitled Departure, which is written by Alan Wake, but he has no memory of writing it. All of these little manuscripts that get left behind of his own novel that he doesn't remember writing all start getting brought into the real town of Bright Falls, is it? And yeah, just essentially his novel that he doesn't remember writing starts coming to life. I won't get too much into the rest of the plot because there's a couple of other things I want to talk about here, but yeah, to not get too spoilery, just that's the general premise, is that Alan Wake goes on a vacation to stop his writer's block, and then all of a sudden shit starts going down. He's written a novel and the novel's coming to life. Pretty standard for, again, like the setup of a tropey horror game, but this is apparently not a horror game.
Yeah. Also, as well, if he was such a good writer, he'd be able to predict the ending to his own story.
But he doesn't remember writing his own story.
He's aware how stories work, though, right?
But he doesn't know how fucking coked out, blacked out Alan Wake decides to write in a cabin.
That's the thing, when Stephen King got coked out, he wrote Cujo. That's the fucking big dog that rips people's heads off.
That's the thing. Do you reckon Stephen King knew how Cujo ended when he woke up and started reading through it?
No idea. Must have done. This big fucked up dog's gonna come get you.
After Remedy Entertainment in 2003 had worked on Max Payne 1 and 2, they spent some time recovering from the crunch, quote unquote. Oh, a good old video game development.
Yay.
And they started coming up with different concepts for a new project. Amongst these was the concept for Alan Wake. And early on, this was based on trying to tell a deeper narrative story than what Max Payne had been, influenced by the works of Stephen King and David Lynch, in particular Twin Peaks.
So if you're going to try and write a cohesive story and you think, do you know what our inspiration for that is? David Lynch. Now, one of my favourite quotes from David Lynch was someone asked him, what do you think is your most political film? I forget what he says now. I forget which one of his films he says. I think he says Eraserhead. And the interviewer just says, can you explain? No. It's like, that's just David Lynch. What do you think's your most political film? This one. Really? Do you want to explain that? No.
Nah.
Story about David Lynch is, there was a guy who did the lighting for Twin Peaks, and he was crouched at the foot of the bed doing the lighting for a scene, and David Lynch burst out laughing when he saw him, and filmed him just at random, because he thought he looked funny when he was crouched at the bottom of the bed like a weirdo. And then later in filming, when he was doing the editing, realised that same guy was accidentally in a mirror in a shot, and decided on a whim to make that guy the villain of all of Twin Peaks.
And to be fair, he made for a creepy villain when I started looking up clips of Twin Peaks.
Yep, but he's just literally a dude at the bottom of the bed doing lighting, and David Lynch is like, perfect, that's my villain now. It's like, do you want to explain? No.
Refuses to elaborate, leaves.
True hero.
As we mentioned earlier, it's really not hard to tell that they just looked at Twin Peaks and Stephen King novels and, like, jobs are good and let's go.
Incomprehensible nonsense, let's go.
Is Twin Peaks one of the most influential things since its release?
Absolutely, yeah. Deadly Premonition rips it off.
There's countless things that are inspired by it. Even, like, I think it's Zelda Majora's Mask. They said that they were inspired by Twin Peaks of, like, oh, well, Link stumbles into Termina, which is this new world, but it's this weird, twisted, dark world where everyone from Hyrule is in it, but they're a different version of themselves and stuff.
Yeah, it's a super influential series, and I can't recommend it because it's like one of those things where you watch it and you ask people, what do you think? Like, I don't know.
Yeah. So I started trying to watch bits of it, and I was like, I kind of get why this is, like, popular, but I guess it's one of those of I already interacted with so many things after Twin Peaks that were referencing it and inspired by it that it doesn't feel as revolutionary to me.
Yeah. I love David Lynch as a creator, but I don't like any of his work. I like The Elephant Man. And Dune. Mm-hmm. He did the first Dune movie, I like that.
Oh, fair, yeah.
Just because Toto did the soundtrack. Yeah, but most of his stuff, it's like, it's not for me. Like, I studied film, but I'm not a film student, so I don't like David Lynch. But I appreciate him as a creator, just not giving a fuck.
Sam Lake has also cited the stories of Bret Easton Ellis and Neil Gaiman as influencers, as well as Mark Z. Danielewski's House of Leaves.
That's a Bret Easton Ellis who did a video on That's American Psycho.
Talking about the Twilight Zone inspiring them, and Alfred Hitchcock's classic horror film, The Birds. So yeah, just like a lot of different things. The setting is definitely inspired heavily by Twin Peaks.
Yeah, I can see those influences. Like, if you're going to make any story that involves like any element of tension, you're going to be doing a Hitchcock reference, whether you know it or not. It's like one of my favourite quotes is a Hitchcock quote about film, at least anyway, where it's like, he was asked to define what tension is. It's like, well, tension is a scene where there's a bomb under a table, and the audience knows the bomb's there, but the people at the table don't. That's the essence of tension, that you as an audience know something that the character doesn't. Maybe
that's not exactly the case in Alan Wake, because I remember playing through this game, and admittedly, I was probably around 18.
Yeah.
So I was definitely younger at the time. I wasn't a kid or anything, but...
Prime audience for it, though.
I do remember just half of the time having no absolute clue what was going on.
That's like prime audience for it, though, because it's the kind of story where... similar to like some of Stephen King's work or Lynch's work, where people make it their entire personality. Like David Lynch is like Tarantino for film people who are a bit weird.
Isn't that Tarantino?
Yeah, but like a bit weirder than that.
Like horror style.
It's like when you become like a weird film bro, you get obsessed with the work of one of two creators. It's either David Lynch or it's Tarantino. And hopefully you grow up a little bit and realise that those two filmmakers were inspired by themselves, other weirder filmmakers.
Oh, I thought you were just going to say you get inspired by both of them.
Oh god, no, that'd be the most... the pretension will be off the fucking charts.
They both make weird and good at times work, and I'm like, I was the one who got into Tarantino. Then you then start looking at their inspirations themselves.
That's the thing, yeah. It's like, the worst thing you can do is be a creator who's inspired by another creator without acknowledging that creator's own inspirations, because that's how you grow.
And then, naturally, it all comes back to, in filmmaking, just like fucking Kurosawa.
It always goes back to
Kurosawa. Like, I'm not saying they were the first person to ever make film or anything, but so many modern creators end up, like, when you trickle it back through their inspirations and their inspirations, it's like... Yep. So many of it just comes back to like, oh, fucking Kurosawa.
It goes back to Kurosawa, it goes back to Orson Welles, and it goes back to Alfred Hitchcock.
Karl, you mentioned earlier something you wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
And that is this game's product placements.
Which is excessive and hilarious.
And only exists in, like, the 360 and I think, like, the Windows version based off the 360 version.
Which eventually had to be patched to remove some of these licensed elements. And what licensed elements do they include? So the one that I remember is Duracell.
No, it's not, apparently. 'Cause I thought it was Duracell, but it's Energizer batteries.
Oh man, they must get confused all the time for each other. But either way, yeah, it's some
Yes.
battery companies like, oh, you've got a torch. What are the batteries you put in your torch? It's got to be Energizer batteries, but the torch runs out in like a minute, which makes the batteries look shit, and I don't know how they cleared that. I've got no issue with licensed stuff that exists in our world being put into a game. In some cases, it can add to, this is like my inner student coming out in a verisimilitude, which is the term used to describe like making a world feel real. So the verisimilitude of the world, to establish that you can do things like put in products from our world.
Well, that's kind of why product placement works so well normally, is because as long as it's not really in your face and a character is not mentioning it all the time. Like, say, for example, if I'm just drinking from this little cup, and it's just, I'm drinking from a cup with Toad on it and it never gets brought up or mentioned.
Yeah.
That feels fairly natural, right?
Because, brands exist in our world. It's understandable. In a film, like where someone has, I don't know, the example I always use is, it's the Transformers movie where Mark Wahlberg drinks a Bud Light, and an entire truck crashes, and the entire scene is framed around him drinking the beer.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if the beer was just in the background, that's one thing, but it's the fact that the scene draws attention to it, and it's like there's a limit to how you do it, and it's like it's a very delicate balancing act.
And the fact that every time anyone ever drinks from anything when it's on camera, it's like they make sure that they're always holding it with the brand, like not covered up by their hands at all.
Which just makes it feel not real, and that does not add to the verisimilitude of the world. So, But I feel like with Alan Wake, they should have used it as an opportunity to make a reference rather than make it a real thing. Like the batteries could have had a cool pun name that had been a reference to some literary inspiration.
Maybe, yeah, but I mean, they wanted to get paid, Karl. Video game is expensive.
Like, would it be far cuter if it's like, King batteries?
Yeah.
Something like that. Lynch batteries or something like that.
The Twin Peaks battery.
Yeah, they could have done that. They could have put references in like that. That would have been cute, right?
It would have been, yeah, but they did say that they tried to, quote, be very conservative and attentive towards gamers.
And the best ones is like, over the weekend I played like Burnout again, because a friend came around and booted up Burnout for the PS2. That game has like, because it's an EA game, it has ads for like Battlefield 2 and like Axe body spray.
Yeah. You're driving through like cities and stuff, there are billboards, you might as well use those billboards to advertise your own products.
Yeah, or in Tekken 8, there was an update to Tekken 8 because for some reason in the Tekken games, Kazuya is described as being like is a sneakerhead and he collects sneakers. So what they've done is they've got an official collaboration with Nike, and Kazuya has his own brand of shoes in that universe, and the stage that's set in Times Square has a big Nike billboard with Kazuya flexing these like Nikes on. I don't mind that.
It's one thing I remember us being surprised about when we were playing through the Spider-Man games is that, Insomniac is owned by Sony and PlayStation. Like, the fact that that's a PlayStation published game made by a PlayStation owned studio, but there isn't PlayStation or Sony products in like Miles or Peter's room or anything.
Yeah, it's like when you go into it, like you see Miles as wearing headphones. That music is a big part of his character. He listens to music. Why is he not wearing Sony branded headphones?
Yeah, and it's just really weird. Like, he's got, a bunch of different tech in his room, like TV, laptop, stuff like that. Like, why are none of them like Sony branded? It's kind of weird that they didn't utilize that, because it would have been a nice, easy way to promote their own products without feeling in your face.
Yeah, because it wouldn't have been forced, because of course, like, Sony do make good music equipment. It's not like in The Amazing Spider-Man where, like, Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, the tech-savvy, super smart Spider-Man, uses fucking Bing.
Which may be more applicable nowadays, but at the time was definitely not what most people were using.
Yeah, or his dad uses a Sony Vaio laptop that's on screen and somehow manages to transfer a file mid-plane crash.
Like, the indestructible Sony Vaio laptop that flies everywhere and never breaks internet connection while getting, like, blown up.
And it's like, brand is always front and centre. It's like, advertising in media is difficult. It's a very fine balancing act, and it's like it requires a deft hand. But the problem is advertisers and brands don't have a deft hand, because they refuse to see their product in a way that is not acceptable to them.
And there is a couple of brands that it does mention that were maybe a little bit more subtle in the game, but it does say another one that was very prominent is the phone service provider Verizon Wireless. Besides the branded mobile phones appearing on screen, there is also a 30-second Verizon commercial viewable on some of the game's interactive TVs. And there's also apparently a famous allusion to the company's famous advertising line, "Can you hear me now?" during a phone conversation in the DLC.
That's bad. Because what you should do if you can watch a TV, do what the game The Darkness did. So The Darkness is not a very good game. It's like based on this edgy-ass comic. It's fine. That game, they got a bunch of public domain movies and just put them on TVs around the world, and you can watch episodes of Flash Gordon.
Oh, that's cool, yeah.
That's what they should have done and do you know what they probably could have done in Alan Wake? Go get the rights to an old, one of the lesser-known Hitchcock movies and put that on a TV.
Yeah, there's also apparently just billboards around Bright Falls for Energizer and Verizon.
Yeah, because do you know what I think when I think small town America? A fuck-off billboard for a battery.
And Alan and Alice Wake's car shows that it has the Microsoft-powered Ford Sync-In Vehicle Entertainment System.
I'm so glad this shit's dead.
Speaking of dead, pour one out, because an Xbox 360 console can be seen in one section of the game, with the box of the fictional Night Springs video game next to it, which are collectibles in the DLC.
See, I don't mind that, because that means when they ported it to the PlayStation, that's one Xbox in there.
I wonder what they did with that, right? Did they keep a 360 in like the PS4 version?
So I remember there was a football team that was sponsored by Xbox. So my friend, whenever he played online on PlayStation, always picked that team because he always found it amusing that PlayStation had to render the Xbox logo.
I always don't mind little things like that, where it's like, oh, when you boot up Pokemon, like your Switch is just sitting there in your bedroom or whatever, and like, I can't remember whether it's all of the Switch Pokemon games or just some of them or whatever, but at very least one of them, I noticed that the game's Joy-Cons on your console match the coloured Joy-Cons you were using at the time.
And it doesn't draw attention to it, which is fine. Or like Ninja Gaiden, where you can randomly find an Xbox in an alleyway and it just restores all your health. That's fun, right? Like little things like that, where it's like a literal billboard in the game for a fucking battery. And you know as well, like Energizer, like you have to put the billboard in. You can't damage the billboard. It's like one of my biggest fucking pet peeves. And I think I mentioned Burnout earlier. These kind of deals killed Burnout. They killed any interest I will ever have in any driving game, because driving games strive for realism. And as part of that strive for realism, they have to reach out to real-world car companies and ask them for the rights to their cars. And those companies, as part of their stipulation, do not let them add vehicle damage or defamation to the cars. Because they don't want these digital facsimiles of their products being shown damaged. So as a result, even though they could, they don't have car damage in Forza or Gran Turismo. And it pisses me off every single time.
They have like car damage, but it's minimal car damage compared to like you'll fly out on like a ramp in Forza Horizon, crash your car, roll it 8 times, and you've got like a couple of cracked windows.
It's to the point as well where Forza had a cross collaboration with Lego, and you got a Lego car, and the Lego car can't crash and explode.
It's Lego!
Exactly, but Lego didn't want the car exploding.
Oh, dear.
And I think it pisses me off so much because that strive for realism, and the brands are so arsey about what can be done with their products, they don't let you do the cool thing of crashing your car or having realistic vehicle damage, which they could realistically put in if not for the fact that Ford and Lamborghini and Ferrari and stuff and don't want their cars being damaged.
Another bad part of licensing, Karl, is that it's got a few songs that were licensed in here that were eventually removed in May 2017 because of licensing and shit like that. So it lasted 7 years, having Haunted by Poe, Space Oddity by David Bowie, Anime Bells, How Can I Be Sure, and Coconut by Harry Nilsson. And all of those songs were just removed from the game in 2017.
I would be like, fuck this. I would never do it.
This is weird, though, because it's different than like when it happened with GTA.
Okay.
So it got removed, but the removal did not affect those who already own the game.
Do they manage to argue for a specific license or something like that?
I guess when you've purchased the game, whatever agreement they had that was permanent for the people who have bought it, but not for people who purchase it after a certain date. So with this, what happened was they removed from stores in May 2017, and then the licenses got put back up, and thus it got reinstated on the store in October 2018.
This stuff it's infuriating.
It's like, goddamn.
It happened with Metal Gear Solid 3. Metal Gear Solid 3 got removed from the HD Collector's Edition you could buy on Xbox 360 because they licensed historical footage from Getty.
Yeah.
And Getty threw a shit fit and said remove it from the game. It's hard baked into the cutscene. Okay, then just delete the entire game.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
That's Alan Wake for everyone. I really enjoy the game, and I think it does a lot of interesting things, but ultimately it was a 7 out of 10, 8 out of 10 kind of game for me that just, the idea of fighting the flashlight monster mechanic is cool, but when you have to do it over and over again, it's alright. And the game is fun, but again, half of the time I just didn't know what was going on. It seems like Alan Wake 2, which was much better received, was just a clear step up from the original.
Do you know what they should have done though? Do you know when they ran out? Because I don't like the idea of putting branded real things into games and movies, because it results in nonsense like we talked about. But I think if they do, and when the licenses run out, I think other companies are missing a trick, not jumping in.
Duracell comes in hey, put our battery.
Do you know when Energizer complained of take our stuff out or whatever? I think Duracell should come in and give them their stuff for free to get good press.
It shouldn't be Duracell. It should be Home Bargain's own brand.
Why not? Yeah. Or do you know when David Bowie's not David Bowie himself, but he's the rights holder for his music. Take our music out. Mm-hmm. If I was another band who was going to look for some easy free goodwill and publicity, I'd just say you can use our music. We're not going to be bitch and moan.
The fun of licensing and all that jazz, but yeah.
Terrible. Right?
Thank you all for, choosing this topic, and I hope everyone who did vote for this had fun, but yeah, just, a very good, try at the game, which Alan Wake 2 eventually stepped in and was don't worry, I've got this.
Yeah.
We're going to give you the prime Alan Wake experience.
Just the only thing I remember about the game is I thought it was Duracell, because it's just, who gives a fuck about what brand of batteries you use anyway?
Yeah. Energizer cares, Karl.
They do. They care so much they pay to have their batteries in the game, and I still don't remember. Which shows it didn't work.
Thank you all for watching.
Cheers.